Welcome to our latest Wandering Walks of Wonder adventure. Today we're headed down to Springfield, Missouri and a historic tour of the downtown area. Springfield dates itself back to 1829 when John Polk Campbell moved into this area from his home state from Tennessee. But Springfield is best known as the birthplace of Route 66. And it's all due to one man, John Woodruff. Mr. Woodruff was an attorney and businessman in Springfield in the early 1900s. One of his earliest efforts to attract travelers was the creation of the Woodruff Arms Hotel that he built in 1925. It was one of the first hotels in Springfield that catered to automobile travelers rather than those who rode trains. Back in the early 1900s, the roads in Missouri were little more than muddy tracks with little or no pavement. That changed when Governor Frederick Gardner created a tax on gasoline to pave roads throughout the state. Two of those highways, State Highway 5 and State Highway 14, later Route 66, intersected in Springfield. That caused Woodruff to begin calling Springfield the Crossroads of America. In 1926, Maurice Gilliaz built this historic theater in downtown Springfield. This Spanish colonial revival-style building was constructed mainly of concrete and steel because Gilliaz was also the largest bridge and road contractor in this part of Missouri. Route 66 crossed right in front of the doors of the theater, and that is why you see the large neon sign that would have attracted customers to see the live shows and movies presented inside. When the theater opened, it mainly showcased live vaudeville acts and silent movies. In 1928, the first talking pictures were shown, and in 1936, the first color movie was presented here. We're now walking past the Hotel Sanson. This brick craftsman-style hotel opened in 1911 and was built by John Woodruff, who we just talked about regarding the history of Route 66 in Springfield. This was the second hotel Woodruff built to cater to the growing number of automobile travelers who were traveling along historic Route 66 and passed just feet here right in front of the hotel. Woodruff named the hotel the Sanson because he specifically had it built for a local Italian immigrant and restaurateur by the name of Charles Sanson. Sanson operated a nearby popular restaurant, and Woodruff leased the hotels to Sanson from 1911 to 1922. It became one of the most luxurious and popular hotels in Springfield. We're now heading towards the public square area of Springfield. Today it's called Park Central Square, and one of the first buildings that was constructed on this square is the Holland building. This 5-story building was constructed in 1914 as an office building, and it continues over 100 years later to house various offices for downtown companies and law firms. As we walk by the building, take note of the marble facade on the outside of the building. This marble was installed in 1948. In 1913, much of the square in downtown Springfield burned to the ground when the original Harris department store caught fire. As city planners worked to renovate the downtown area, the Electric Theater Company out of Kansas City came to town to develop a new modern theater. In 1916, the Electric Theater opened to glowing reviews. In 1930, Paramount purchased the Electric Theater Company, and the name was changed to the Paramount Theater. A few short years later, the building was sold to the Fox Theater chain. Unlike other theaters that Fox purchased, they renamed the theater back to the Electric. In 1946, disaster struck as the Electric Theater nearly burned to the ground following a massive fire. After 2 years of restoration, the theater reopened as the Fox Theater. Right next door to the Fox Theater is the new Springfield History Museum. This building is housed in the old Bar's department store right here on Park Central Square and is a great place to learn about the significant events and famous people who have helped make Springfield what it is today. In fact, if you look at my playlist, you can see a complete walkthrough of this history museum on the square in my video list. One of the most fascinating things you'll learn by touring the museum is that the first one-on-one quick-draw shootout was fought just steps outside the museum entrance. Wild Bill Hickok and Davis Tutt got into an argument over gambling debts. After shouting insults to each other and standing just 75 feet apart, the two men quickly drew their weapons and fired. Tutt's bullet missed, but Hickok shot Tutt through the heart and he died instantly. After a 3-day trial, Wild Bill Hickok was acquitted on the charge of manslaughter. In 1869, a German immigrant by the name of Charles Hare founded what would become Hare's Department Store. Hare's began as a small dry goods company and soon grew to be one of the largest stores in Springfield. After a fire destroyed the original dry goods store in 1913, the company built this large 7-story department store in 1915. This store was constructed of steel and terracotta reinforced with concrete. It was one of the most fireproof buildings in the downtown area due to its construction materials and methods. On top of having 7 floors of goods for shoppers to browse through, the building also had a large auditorium that the public could use for free. And at one time there was also a rooftop garden cafe and large observation tower that rose 2 more stories above the roof line. The tower was so tall that the police and fire departments used it as a radio tower to transmit early radiograph signals. Throughout the history of the United States, there have been numerous instances where the policies of the U.S. government have been harmful, often even deadly, to Native Americans who lived in this country for thousands of years. But there is none darker or more disastrous than the forcible removal of Indians in the 1830s, especially the Cherokee tribe from the eastern areas of the United States, moving them to Indian Territory, which is now in the state of Oklahoma. In 1825, the U.S. Congress passed a law which forced the Indians to move from areas east of the Mississippi River to Indian Territory. By 1830, Congress authorized President Andrew Jackson to move the Indians by force. For over 5 years, the leaders of the Cherokee Nation tried to work through the court system to retain their homes and properties in areas of Georgia and Florida, but all these cases failed. Andrew Jackson then ordered the U.S. Army to force the Indians to move from their ancestral homes. The tribes were gathered into groups and shipped via train and riverboats to the Mississippi River, then forced to march along the rough trails through Arkansas and Missouri to their new homes in Oklahoma, many of those passing right through this area in downtown Springfield. There were many delays in the journey westward, and the forced march across Missouri occurred during the winter months of 1837 and 1838, where thousands died from disease and the cold weather. This route that we're walking along here was designated by the National Park Service as part of the National Trail of Tears system. and and Springfield sits right along one of these trails. On our right is the Springfield Life building, now known as the Seville Lofts. This commercial building in downtown Springfield has seen a number of different functions since it was first built in 1906. It began as offices for the Springfield Life Insurance Company on the upper floors and retail space on the ground floor. In 1928, the building was renovated into the Savoy Hotel. The Savoy, which was renamed as the Hotel Seville in 1933, was one of the largest and most luxurious hotels in Springfield until the 1990s. After a period of decline, the downtown area of Springfield saw a renovation renaissance in the 1990s. The Savoy was completely renovated, and today the upper floors have been transformed into loft apartments, while the ground floor still operates as retail and restaurant locations. The local chapter of Masons constructed this building for their temple in 1906 to house offices, an auditorium, and their meeting hall. The Masons played a big role in incorporating the city in the early 1900s. Right next door to the Masons Temple, is Landers Theater. Built in 1909, the Landers Theater is the oldest and largest civic theater operating in the entire state of Missouri. This French-influenced neoclassical building was designed by the Bowler brothers, who were well known for designing elaborate theaters across the Midwest in the early 1900s. One of the more unique design elements of this theater is that wood was used for most of the framing. During the early 1900s, steel and cast iron were usually the materials of choice when contracting and constructing large theaters. Wood was probably used because Mr. Landers was owned the largest lumber business in town. In 1961, a live country music variety program called the Five-Star Jubilee was broadcast from inside this theater. The program ran on Friday evenings and was the first network color television series to be shown outside of New York City or Hollywood. In 1906, the Springfield Business College opened their doors inside this building here on Walnut Street, and about a decade later, the college moved to another location, and the building was remodeled in 1918 to become the Marquette Hotel. The Marquette is a great example of one of the largest early 1900s hotels in downtown Springfield. In fact, the hotel was one of the largest in the entire city for quite a period of time. Across the street from the Old Marquette Hotel is St. Paul's United Methodist Church. The congregation of St. Paul Methodist was founded in 1831. It was one of the earliest congregations in town. After holding services in a number of different locations, the congregations constructed this church in 1904. Their old church was located just a few blocks away and was used during the American Civil War as an arsenal. St. Paul's was expanded in 1923 as the congregation continued to grow. Some of the more notable features of the church are the beautiful stained glass windows, the dome on the west side of the building, and the ionic columns that are on the front of the church. This Gothic mixed with Queen Anne style house was built in 1881 and was home to three of the most prominent families in Springfield for over 100 years. The Keat, McElhenney, and Holland families were important merchants and bankers during the early days of the founding of Springfield. The Holland Banking Company was one of the first businesses in Springfield and helped finance many of the larger businesses during the era following the American Civil War. The founder of the bank was C.B. Holland. His niece, Catherine, married James Keat. The Keats were the owners of the largest grocery store business in the area for decades. James and Catherine were the first to move into this large brick home. Eventually, the home was inherited by their daughter and her husband, Claude McElhenney. We're now standing here in front of Christ Episcopal Church. The parish of Christ Episcopal was formed in 1860. In 1870, congregants helped fund a wooden board and batten Gothic-style church that still exists today. By the 1920s, the congregation continued to grow and a new church was needed for worship. Rather than tear down the old wooden building that had served the parish needs for over 60 years, the parish decided to construct a larger sanctuary, this time out of stone. The architect kept the same Gothic elements of the original church, and both the wood and the stone structures blend together today seamlessly. This Moorish-inspired temple was designed and built for the Springfield Shriner organization in 1922. The Shriners, or as they are officially called, the Ararat Temple of the Ancient and Accepted Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine, were formed in Springfield in 1903. As membership in the fraternal organization grew, the organization raised funds to build this elaborate, some would say exotic building in downtown Springfield. The Shriner Organization Springfield has a current membership of about 6,000. They are well known for their charitable giving, especially to the Shriners Children's Hospital in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The Shrine Mosque has one of the largest auditoriums in this area of Missouri. Many performers and speakers have played inside, including Frank Sinatra, Glenn Miller, as well as speeches by Ronald Reagan and President Harry S. Truman. Ahead of us is the American Legion Memorial. The American Legion Post 69 is one of the oldest American Legion posts in the state of Missouri. It is also known as the Goad-Ballinger Post. John Goad was a prominent Springfield lawyer who was the first Greene County soldier to die in World War I. Homer Ballinger died in an ammunition train accident in 1918. This particular American Legion post was dedicated in 1934 with remarks given at the opening by Sergeant Alvin York, a World War I hero. At the beginning of the Second World War, the post formed a Last Man's Club. The members voted for the last survivor of both world wars, and they would receive a bottle of champagne. The bottle was presented to Homer Wilson, a Navy seaman who was awarded the bottle as the last survivor in 1992. He was 97 years old at the time he received the award. Mr. Wilson donated the bottle of champagne to the Post Museum, which is located inside the museum. Furniture manufacturing was once a thriving business in Springfield. In the early 1900s, there were about 8 furniture companies in town that employed nearly 100 skilled woodworkers and carpenters. The Mulholland Kelly building that we're standing here in front of right now served as one of those furniture companies. This early 1900s building is now a residential space with luxury loft apartments. Founders Park celebrates the history of Springfield. Over the years, this site has been a stone quarry, a blacksmith shop, a hardware company, as well as a lumber yard. The city decided to raze some dilapidated buildings to construct this nearly 1-acre park. Inside the park, there's a 250-seat outdoor amphitheater with a nice large stage. There's also a large 120-foot-long mural that depict the people, buildings, and historical events that encompass the first 100 years of the founding of the city. As we walk through the park, let's not forget that there is a recreation of the spring where the name Springfield came from when the city was founded in 1829. The last building on our walk is the Godfrey Furniture Company building. This building was constructed in 1890 and was the site of the Godfrey Furniture Company until it closed in 1947. I hope you've enjoyed this Wandering Walks of Wonder tour here in downtown Springfield, Missouri. If you've been to Springfield or live in Springfield, leave a comment on one of the buildings or people or places or events that you think is most significant in town. Otherwise, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and we will see you on our next Wandering Walks of Wonder adventure. Take care now. Bye-bye.